Today we heard we're celebrating Good Shepherd Sunday. So every year on the fourth Sunday of Easter, all of the readings, all of the prayers at Mass center on this image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd. And so we call this Good Shepherd Sunday. And so in a particular way, we also then pray for the shepherds that lead and guide our church, like those that Jesus has made shepherds. So the Pope, the bishops, the priests, and then we pray for an increase of vocations to the priesthood. But then it's a double blessing this Good Shepherd Sunday that we're also receiving for the first time, right? We're receiving our new universal shepherd, right? Pope Leo XIV, Robert Francis Prevost, American boy from Chicago. And it's great that he's an American and all that, but it's very annoying that he's from Chicago. So I went to school in Chicago, and all of the Chicago boys are really insufferable at the moment. They're just, man. So it's fine though, we're gonna get over it. Everyone, though, predictably, they've been trying to predict what kind of pope that he's going to be. Is he going to do this or that or this and that? Okay. What I've been focused on, though, is something more important, which is his brothers. I don't know if you've seen the interviews with his brothers. These boys are hilarious. Like, clearly they were not ready to be interviewed. Clearly they were not, prepped by their brother of what's going to happen if, a camera is stuck in my face all of a sudden and I need to do this professionally. So they're just shooting from the hip, and it's awesome. One of his brothers was just they're like, what are you going to do when you see your brother for the first time? He's like, I don't know. I'm probably going to go up to him and say, Rob, you idiot, what did you do? So just they're not PR trained at all. So it's just fun to watch them. It's television gold at the moment. In seriousness, though, I have been very struck by our Holy Father, by our new shepherd, just the way that he carries himself, his meekness, his humility, his thought, just everything so far. It's just been beautiful to watch. In his first homily, though, so this is the day after he was elected. He had Mass with all the cardinals in the Sistine Chapel, and this is the first chance he had actually time to prepare to what he wanted to say, because the first time it's like, hey, you're the Pope, and in 10 minutes you need to speak to the world. Go. So he didn't, come on, that's not fair. But when he had a chance to think for 10 seconds about what he would like to say, in his first homily he said this, that many people today believe in Jesus. They believe that he taught things, that he did miracles, all that sort of stuff, great. And yet, quote, they live in a state of practical atheism. They live in a state of practical atheism. In other words, yeah, they believe God exists and Jesus is real and maybe he rose from the dead or things, okay. But practically, day to day, in the way they practice their life, live their life, practically, they live as if God isn't real, as if God doesn't exist. They believe he exists, but practically, day to day, it's like he doesn't. And this really struck me because I said that. I was just like, bro, what, have you been listening to my homilies or something? He totally plagiarized me. I'm like, I've been saying that for weeks. It's because that's just it. That's precisely it. I've been saying it for weeks. We all have our faith. We all believe Jesus rose from the dead, all that. We're all on board with that, great. But then practically, it's very easy for us to slip into our faith isn't really real. And I do this too. I do all the church stuff. I'm real into it. I don't know if you knew that. But then easily, even just the way that I operate, the way that I work, it can be well, yeah, I believe in God, but God's not real. I have to do all the work. It's all about me and what I can get done. And easily I begin to operate with a sort of practical atheism. Right? That's what the Pope is getting at. So again, practically easy to do. And so that's why practically, since Easter, I've been trying to help us just focus on what are those concrete ways that the faith can begin to and continue to shape our life. Practically, concretely. We've talked about our need to concretely belong to the church, and not just the parish, but the church. We've talked about this essential aspect of mercy, the need to show mercy to others. Last week we talked about love and how English love is so boring, but how agape love, this Greek word, agape love, this self-giving, self-sacrificial love, that's something very different, but that's something we very much need to put into practice. Today then, what Jesus gives to us, it's another very simple, very practical, and yet it's an essential and a fundamental thing. Very practical way to allow the faith to shape our life. So Jesus, the Good Shepherd, is talking about how he's the shepherd, right? Referring to himself as that. But then Jesus, he says, well, what about you, the sheep? I don't know if you knew that. We're the sheep. He said it in the psalm today. We're the sheep of his flock. Okay. Which is insulting to yourself, which if you thought about it. Okay, what about us? What does Jesus say his sheep do? If we're his sheep, and we all said it, what are his sheep all about? He says this, my sheep, if you're one of my sheep, hear my voice. This is what Jesus said in the gospel today. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. They hear my voice, and they follow me. Okay, so the simple question, again, the question of, is my faith still shaping my life? Am I practically living my faith, or am I practical atheist? The question is, do I know the voice of the Good Shepherd? Do I hear him? Do I listen to him? And then do I follow him? Do I know the voice of the Good Shepherd? Do I hear his voice and follow after him? Today's Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. Good job. Crushing it, moms. There's these beautiful videos on YouTube where these children that have been born deaf, they get their hearing aids or their cochlear implants for the first time. Come on, use YouTube for something good, people. Like, these videos are amazing. But one of my favorites is this little baby, probably like 2 months old, 3 months old, tiny little baby still. But it gets its first hearing aids. And so then the mother begins to speak to this child. And this baby just lights up with a huge smile, and then all of a sudden it just starts to cry. It's just like it's so overwhelmed by hearing its mother's voice, and then it just clings to its mom. Okay, so it's just a beautiful image of what happens when we hear the voice of the person who loves us. There's a joy, there's a peace, there's just an overwhelming sense of security, of holding on to this person. Right, that's hearing the voice of someone that loves us. That's the fruit, again, of hearing the voice. We hold on to them. Now, when this kid grows up, I'm sure mom is also going to maybe yell at the kid, maybe correct the kid, tell the kid some things that he doesn't want to hear. Okay. And yet there's that voice of the mother continues to speak to the child. Okay, so this is what Jesus is talking about. Do we know his voice? We hear a lot of voices, but do we know his voice? That baby knew. Like, this isn't just random voice, cool, now I can hear. No, this child heard the voice of the mother who loves him. The voice of the one who loves him. He hears the voice, recognizes that voice, and then clings to her, right? Follows after her. Right? That's what Jesus is talking about. Do we hear his voice and follow after him? The counterexample to this, so as you know, I was down in Wichita for several years at the parishes down there. Both of them had Catholic schools, so you can guess which one it is. You'll never guess. But one of these kids, a middle school kid, was having trouble in school, flunking classes and stuff. So the principal couldn't get through to this kid, so she did exactly what you'd think, sent him to me, which I don't know why. But all of a sudden I have this middle school kid in my office, and we're like, all right, what's going on? Why are you flunking? What's going on? And he tells me, well, I don't really think I need school. I think I'm gonna do something else with my life. And I'm like, oh, pray tell, what's going on? It's like, well, I think I'm gonna play in the NBA. Okay, one thing you need to know about this kid, two things. One, he was never gonna get taller than 5'6". Two, he was about the 8th best basketball player out of the 9 boys in his class. So that gives you a picture of what's going on here. So then he said, I prayed about it, Father. Oh boy. I prayed about it, and I think God's telling me that I'm supposed to play in the NBA when I grow up. Okay. Now, regardless of the fact that it's now 8 years later, and this kid didn't even play in high school basketball, and he's definitely not playing in the NBA, at that moment, the moment he said, I prayed about it, and God told me I'm supposed to play in the NBA, with 100% certainty I know, God did not tell him that. I knew it. Okay? He thought he was hearing that, but I knew he was not hearing that. And it's funny with this kid, but then we have to think, like, how often do we do the exact same thing? The exact same thing. We get a voice in our head, we get an idea in our head, and we're like, yeah, that's probably God talking to me. And we just run with it. But it's just our idea, and all of a sudden we're just following our own ideas. So that's what I mean. Can we recognize? Do we know how to recognize? Are we listening for the voice of the Good Shepherd? Or are we just living a sort of practical atheism? Oh, I believe in the Good Shepherd, and now I'm just going to go live my life however I want. Right? We all believe in God, Jesus, we get that. But then practically, day to day, do we truly listen? Because who do we listen to the most? Statistically. If you're over the age of 50, statistically, you listen between 7 and 13 hours, 32, sorry, I have dyslexia. 7 and 32 hours a week, you listen to cable news or talk radio. That's who we listen to. If you're under 30, you listen mostly to the news you find on social media and Facebook Reels and Instagram Reels and TikTok Reels and B Reels. Lots of Reels for these kids. Or we listen to podcasts, audiobooks, blogs. We listen to a lot of voices, a lot of them. And yeah, we need to listen to some news. I'm not saying go put your head in the sand or something. We need some news. But who do we listen to? And who's shaping us and forming us? And then think, what's the fruit of that? What happens when somebody, I don't know if you've ever met somebody that watches the news 72 hours a week. You probably know at least one person like that. What's their life? What's the fruit of that in their life? Could we agree that they're often very angry and upset and worried and anxious? That's the fruit of that. Listening to that voice. You can think of the mom and the little baby. What happens when the little baby hears the voice? Joy, peace, security, love, everything. What happens when we listen to the wrong voice? Anger, frustration, worry, anxiety, division. That's what happens. But then also think, again, when practically day to day, what's our reaction to certain things? Do we think, is my first reaction, man, I wonder what Jesus would say about this. I wonder what the church teaches about this. I wonder what the church says about, or do we say, man, I wonder what X, Y, and Z talking head says about this. I wonder what my favorite influencer says. I wonder what so-and-so is saying on cable news about this. Who do we seek out to listen to and to hear? Classic example again, Pope Leo XIV. I hope you stay off the internet. The internet's the worst. But on the internet, within about 13 seconds of him being elected Pope, everyone had already decided he's the devil or he's the bestest saint in the world. There was no middle ground. It was all devil or saint. It's like give the man 10 seconds to speak for himself. Just listen to the shepherd. Are we even listening to what he's saying and doing? Same thing with Jesus. Do we truly listen for his voice? Do we truly listen for his voice? Or do we just come up with our own response, find a response that we like, and then run with that and presume Jesus is probably on board with that too? Okay. So this is where I think very concretely we can begin to allow this faith to shape our lives, to listen, to learn to listen, just to seek to listen to the Good Shepherd, to the church he's given to us to shepherd us, and to listen to our shepherds, and then to follow after the Good Shepherd. For example, just think very practically, how often do you, again, think of how much time you listen to other people. Great. Again, there's some good things, sure. But how much time do you spend listening to the voice of Jesus? For example, how often, have you ever read a gospel like cover to cover? Have you ever read a gospel cover to cover? Have you ever just listened to what Jesus actually, I'm going to write a book one day. It's going to be called #Things Jesus Actually Said. Right? Have you ever listened to what Jesus actually says? Do you spend time in prayer each day just listening for his voice? And not just like, I prayed before I ate today, Father, thank you. But have you just spent daily just listening for his voice? Have we spent time listening to what the Lord is saying to us? Or again, do we just presume that we know what Jesus would say and then we just go with that? Or think very practically, how often do you study your faith and what the church teaches? I don't know if you knew this. The church teaches on just about anything you can possibly think of. However, have you ever gone to look of what is the church given to us to shepherd us? What does the church say about X, Y, and Z? You can find everything: life, money, sex, politics, immigration, work, in vitro fertilization, the rights of workers, whatever you want. Pick anything, social justice, anything. The church has probably said something about something. But again, do we seek out what our shepherds teach us, how they help us understand? Or, again, do we just go to our favorite talking head that we find on the news or social media and go with whatever they said? Are we seeking to listen to the voice of the Good Shepherd? Or do we still just listen to our own voice and the voices we agree with? Because then at the end of the day, it's the question of, am I like that child listening to its mother's voice, or am I like that kid in my office saying, yeah, God wants me to play in the NBA? Fun to laugh at that kid, but then we easily continue to do that the rest of our lives. Okay, so today, when it comes to this question of does the faith shape my life, today the simple question presented to us by Jesus is that, am I listening to my own voice or the voice of the shepherd? Am I listening and following my own ideas, or am I following the shepherd? Am I practically an atheist, or am I truly, concretely, practically allowing this faith that's been given to us, handed down to us, safeguarded for us by the church? Am I allowing that to shape my life? Because when we're listening, and when we begin to listen and to hear the voice of the shepherd and follow after him, that's when we'll see a different fruit in our life. Yeah, sometimes just like a kid and his mom, we may not always like what mom says, and yet all of a sudden we'll see a different fruit. We'll see the fruit of joy and peace and security and a lack of anxiety, all of that, as opposed to the other fruit we're used to. And then we'll be able to say, just like Psalm 23, the famous psalm about shepherds and sheep, then we'll be able to say, the Lord is my shepherd, and I'm not anxious and worried and all that stuff. The Lord is my shepherd, and there's nothing that I shall want.